Hi, welcome everybody. So this session is kicking off at 10 a.m. IST, and wherever you're joining from, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or a very, very good late evening. We are very excited to be here, and it's a very special session. And so just going to the next slide. Let me just begin by saying that I'm Anindita Sharma. I am a consultant based in Singapore, and I have more than 25 years of work experience in the private sector. But here, I am representing the Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, and as a steering committee member to bring a wonderful discussion of energy evaluation professionals. I'm really very glad to be here today and meet everybody. If we go to the next slide, please. Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific is a nonprofit organization established in 2018. We have our geographic reach actually spans all the way in the west from Pakistan, all the way out to the east to New Zealand. What's most important, I think, for me to say to you is that our mission is to advocate for evaluation, objective evaluation of energy policies and programs. And that's why all of us, or many of us, are here today to speak with you. And in fact, there will be 8 of us on stage today, as I will show you on the next slide. Our bios are all on our website, and I will do very proper introductions of each speaker as they come on stage with us. But for now, I would like to welcome each person here with me. So first and foremost, I'd like to welcome Ed Vine from California. Hi, Ed. Good to have you here.
Hi.
Right. Next, welcome Dr. Archana Walia. Hi, Archana. It's good to have you here.
Hi, and good morning, everyone.
Wonderful. Stephen DeFilla is here as well from AppSec China. Hi, Stephen. Can you hear us? And we'd love to hear back from you.
Hello, good afternoon from China. Welcome.
Hi, awesome. We have Ripu Bhanjan Singh also present with us today and ready to talk about some very interesting topics. Hi, Ripu.
Thanks, Ananta. Good morning. This is Ripu from India. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it very much. Now, there are 2 other speakers. Nina Campbell will be joining us a little bit later. She's in Luxembourg. So as she does, we will introduce Nina to you. And we would have also August Stepantoro, but August may not have. Are you here, August?
Yes.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't see you. Hi, and welcome. All right. So we have a fairly packed agenda today. The most important thing here is the issues of energy are very consequential, as all of us do know, whether we talk about climate change or inequity, whether we talk about energy security or a just transition. And the reason all of us are here is to make the point that looking at these things objectively with an evidence focus is really important, particularly as we go into new policies, new funding issues, so on and so forth. That's our motivation to be here. Now, what we would love to know from you is your motivation to be here. So what we have is a very quick question where we'd like to understand why are you here today? On the next slide, there is a very quick survey. What's your primary motivation today? Is it general interest? Is it because of an interest to build capacity or capability? Or are you looking for a community, or is it something else? It's a very quick 20-second response. Okay. Okay, so from what I'm seeing here, many of you are looking to build capability in energy evaluation. That's wonderful. So EEAP absolutely promotes this idea. Please do reach out to us after this and see all the different resources that we do have or can lead you toward. Thank you. It's also good to see that there is a general interest, a very proactive interest in this discussion. And for those of you who are looking for a professional community, again, EEAP is a wonderful place. Reach out to us, and we are very much interested to see how these communities can be developed. Thank you. In terms of our agenda today, it's a very, very simple agenda. I just want to point to a couple of things here. After this, I speak, I'm going to hand over the stage to 6 different speakers, and I'll introduce each of them to you. They will take up different aspects of energy and energy valuations. And then we will go into a panel discussion, and Nazir will share some resources with us before we close. What is really important to understand is, first of all, tactically in terms of timing, this presentation, because there are quite a few speakers, will last between 95, but no more than 105 minutes. So if you start at India time 10 a.m., our hard stop is 11:45 a.m. India time. And in terms of the flow, we will first hear from Ed on energy efficiency valuations, move to Stepan, who will talk about carbon neutrality benchmarking. Then we will change tacks a little bit, go to Nina, who will talk to us about energy valuations and multiple benefits. From there, Archana will build on that and talk about co-benefits. Then we switch a bit more and go to Agus, who will talk about what's happening in Indonesia and the challenges on the ground. And then we close with Ripu, who will tie it together and talk about what the ideal is, but what really is going on, what needs to happen. That's the simple agenda. We would love to hear from you. All chats, all comments are welcome. We will try and take the questions in the end. If there is time in between people speaking, then absolutely we will raise a question to the speaker. Otherwise, we'll take it toward the end. That's pretty much the ending of the intro. What I'd like to do now is bring onto the stage Ed Vine. So Ed is an evaluator for decades. He's really highly regarded, and he's been a wonderful leader at EEAP as well. So today we are going to hear from Ed on the evaluation of energy programs and policies. With this, I'm going to hand the stage over to you, Ed. It's all you now.
Thank you. Hello from Berkeley, California. It's 9:37 p.m. on Tuesday here. I have a 3-hour speech, but I think I'll shorten it to a few minutes. I'm targeting people who are the young evaluators and people who may have less experience than some of us who are presenting today. And next slide, please. And so the question is, what is evaluation? And hopefully most of you on the call know about it, but the way we perceive it and the way we publicize it and discuss this with our stakeholders is it's an objective process, so not subjective, of understanding how a policy or program was implemented, what effects it had, what were the impacts, and for whom and why. How were people affected? And hopefully doing a good evaluation will lead to more effective, sustainable, and just policies and programs. Next slide. So why also do we evaluate? We want to reduce uncertainty. As you know, there's lots of uncertainty in how we make decisions. There's sort of limited information. We want to provide the best information we can so the best decisions are made regarding policies and investments in energy programs, whether it's energy efficiency or renewable energy. That's the perspective we take. And also, we're all looking for what's called untapped opportunities, things we weren't really looking for, but when we do the evaluation, we discover some opportunities nobody's really focusing on. A lot of evaluation over the years is focused on the impacts and estimating, in this case, the change in energy consumption or with renewables production and other targets, and I'll get to that in a sec, due to programs and policies. And then the third reason for evaluation is really to improve program and policy design. We shouldn't see this as a negative exercise and seeing whether people are doing a good job. What we want to do through evaluation is identify the key policies that need to be pursued. Budgets are limited, so we need to know which program budgets should be strengthened or weakened. And then we want to inform resource planners and policymakers as they make their decisions. Next slide, please. So who are these key stakeholders? Well, they're going to vary by region and by country. These are the ones I'm often familiar with, not only in California, but in the United States, as well as in Europe and in Asia. So starting from the top, they're the program implementers. In California, we often have utilities, but they may be third parties or even government agencies. The funders, evaluation isn't free, so somebody has to be funding the evaluation, and they need to know what did they get for the money that they provided for the evaluation. Utility companies have often been a main stakeholder for us because they provide electricity and natural gas, for example, in California and other states in the US. So they want to know how much energy is being saved in order to plan for their energy needs. Manufacturers and retailers also often come into play, particularly when we talk about market transformation. I'll get to that shortly. Regulators, of course, in California and other states, the utility companies are regulated by public service commissions. That's also true in other countries. So the regulators want to know, what do the evaluations say? Planners and forecasters, I mentioned, elected and appointed officials. Sometimes energy issues can be very contentious. Where do we site the next wind power plant, for example? Local governments and communities are important because they want to know, what do we get out of this? Not just what, say, the state of California does. Special interest groups, and often they're like environmental groups who see energy efficiency, renewable energy as a key play for them in terms of where do they invest their attention as well as funds. Sometimes universities, academia are involved as well. Now, there are three types of evaluation. Impact evaluation is the first one. I mentioned that before. The impacts electricity and natural gas over different time periods. And we often looked at gross energy demand savings or net energy demand savings. The difference is what we call additionality. Some people call it attribution, reflecting free riders, people who would have done something anyway, as well as spillover, people who are affected by an energy program. And then the last bullet in the box, and you'll hear about that from the speakers today, increasing interest in multiple impacts, non-energy impacts or multiple benefits or co-benefits, looking at jobs, indoor and outdoor air quality, health, and most importantly now, carbon emissions as with respect to climate change. The second one, which I keep pushing because we're not only interested in the impacts, but how a program is implemented and operating. We really want to get better programs out there. And we want to make sure everything is functioning the way it is. If it isn't, you need to know what are the reasons for success or failure and how those can be changed. So evaluation leads to lots of recommendations to improve the program effectiveness, efficiency, and operational management. Next slide. And the third one, which is becoming very important, particularly in California, we have a huge effort in market transformation. And when people say, well, what is market transformation? Think about going to your local store and trying to buy an air conditioner. Often you want, if you're interested in energy efficiency, you want an energy efficient air conditioner, but there's a range of efficiencies, some from poor efficiency, some to very good efficiency. And the market's transformed and it's changed. You go into the store, they're all high efficiency air conditioners. You don't have to worry about it. So we say the market's changed. And there's lots of programs oriented to that. And we characterize the different markets. That's why retailers and manufacturers come into play. And we assess how the market is doing through market theory and program theory and make sure it's sustainable. Next slide. So those are the three types of evaluation. What's even more important from my perspective as an evaluator is once an evaluation is done, in the old days, when I was starting out, you do an evaluation, put it in a filing cabinet. Well, nobody looks at the report. Nowadays, it's in the cloud. And also, key stakeholders, you can think, going back to that list of the ones you interact with, are they going to read a 200-page evaluation report? They're not. So you need to tailor your evaluation to those stakeholders, not only at the end, maybe with a short presentation, but at the beginning. Try to get them involved in the evaluation, see what their questions are, what data they would like to see collected, and then you keep them together through the whole process. So just don't wait till program's finished and do an evaluation. Get those stakeholders involved with the program implementers and the evaluators, sit around the table and discuss what needs to be done for both implementing the program and for evaluating the program. Next slide. There's lots over the years, fortunately, we have a great repository of papers on evaluation, not only in California, but also in the US, and not only in the US, but in Europe and in Asia Pacific. And we have the websites here and they can be made available to you later. But there's a wealth of information about basically everything in the world: residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, impacts, process, market transformation. So I encourage all of you to go to these sites to learn more. And there's easy search engines to find out what you're interested in. I think that's the next slide. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. I look forward to hearing from the other speakers.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. And that sets up a wonderful foundation of what this is about. And our next speaker, Stefan de Villa, will actually talk to us about a different aspect of it, which is really around carbon emissions. And I already noticed some comments in the chat about climate-friendly policies and programs. So this one is quite interesting. So a little thing about Stefan, I just want everybody to know that Stefan's also a member of the steering committee on EEAP. And at APSEC, an institution he will talk about, he focuses on empowering cities to do results-oriented monitoring of SDGs related to energy, carbon emissions, and disaster risk reduction. So Stefan, I'm going to hand the stage over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening. Let's go to the next slide. I will just show you the agenda and flow of my talk. Ed has already mentioned the context of evaluation can also apply to cities. So this is one of the aspects how we evaluate for cities, but you will see that the evaluation is actually a global evaluation. So first, some words on the context and introduction, then on the global long-term scenarios, then on methodology and interpretation, and then the benchmarking for cities. Next slide. So to set the context, the rise of atmospheric CO2 concentration is striking. We can see that the rise is not only increasing, but also the speed is increasing. The curve gets steeper and steeper. In fact, the increase is so clear that you can use it as a calendar. If you are born in 1940, you can say I'm born at 311 ppm. If you are born in 2024, you can say I'm born at 427 ppm. So every year we have approximately 2 ppm more of carbon concentration in the atmosphere. Next slide. Just a big overview of my organization. Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation is a big part of the world. We can see 38% of the world population, up to 60 or 62% of global GDP, of global CO2 emissions. And all the economies you can see here, it's quite a big part of the world. Next slide. The APEC has actually two energy centers, energy research center. One of them is APEC Sustainable Energy Center, APSEC. which is located in Tianjin in China, has been created in 2014. And we have actually the mission to act as specialized APEC research center to promote pragmatic cooperation on sustainable energy development among the APEC economies. Our center has several pillars. Mine is actually the yellow one, the CNSC pillar, which CNSC stands for Cooperative Network of Sustainable Cities. And so we work primarily with cities along the APEC region. Next slide. This is the slide showing the reports we have been publishing in the last 2 years, and also the last one which is still to come. So you can see a big collection of subjects, all linked to urban development. And all these reports are available easily available for free at the APEC Publications website on the indicated web link. Next slide. So now I come to the global long-term scenarios. Next slide. As you can see, I will start with an example. The global population scenario until 2100. I say both scenarios because we have actually made a sustainable energy scenario, and an unsustainable scenario, but the population is the same. How is it determined? You can see on the right-hand side, we look first at the growth rate. You can see the growth rate of the population is diminishing, has been diminishing constantly since 1963, a turning point, and has come down. And has come down very, very regularly, so that on the right-hand side, you can see the very smooth flattening of the population, which by 2070 will level at just a bit over 10 billion, and afterwards it is going to contract. And the probability of this scenario is very high, because you can see there is very little deviation around on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side figure. There is very little deviation, very little spread of the growth rate around the orange line. Next slide. Another example is per capita emissions of the sustainable energy scenario. This is something which may not be known to many of you. The per capita emissions have actually peaked already in 2013 at just over 4.7 tons per person per year. And since then, they are coming down. 2004 is a so-called turning point. Maybe it was motivated because of the very high and special climate we had in many regions of the world in 2003. People started to become conscious. Anyway, that's a turning point. Since then, emissions per capita are coming down. If they continue to come down in the same way, then you can see we will be at carbon neutrality by mid-century. This is a surprise. And in fact, you can see both left and right-hand figures contain actually two colors, one orange and one gray, and they coincide so precisely that you would think it's the same thing. But this is because it happens that the estimation is so good. We have more than 99.9% of probability that both methods coincide actually in this. The first method is a direct estimation of the orange trajectory, and the gray one is we separately estimate emissions and population, and then we take the division. And this gives normally a different result, and here it coincides. Next slide. Then the renewable installed energy capacity as another example. This is now part of the sustainable energy scenario. And you can see the growth on the left-hand side is very, very constant and very marked. So that growth obviously goes very strong, gives a very strong result, upward result on the right-hand side. So this is how what we can see is that of course we cannot foresee nobody can foresee where is a turning point of this growth. So nobody can foresee whether and when at some moment it will bend and flatten off. So for the moment, the best possible data we have is to say this will continue to grow, and also it will also lead to carbon neutrality at mid-century. Next. Next slide. This shows the energy efficiency as defined by the SDG indicator 731. It's also an indicator used in both scenarios. And it's the SDGs, as you know, define energy efficiencies as energy intensity with respect to total primary energy supply. And you know that this is this indicator is being monitored also in order to have the to foresee whether the postulate of the Sustainable Development Goals will materialize or not. Now, first for the result, we have in this case here the forecast or the scenario for the direct estimation, the orange one. It gives a too low probability, and it's the orange on both left and right hand figures. But so we have taken the alternative estimate, which is first to estimate the TPS and GDP separately, and then take the division, and that is the gray one. And the gray one actually leads to a flattening out of energy efficiency at about 1 megawatt hour per US dollar by 2100. Now, the green trajectory, unfortunately, is not visible in this figure properly. At the left hand and the left and right both are wrong. So the green is the postulate of the United Nations development goals to double the speed of efficiency, which means on the left-hand side it should be a bit lower than the orange one between 2020 and 2030, and on the right-hand side it should be steeper. It is steeper, but it's not the right place. So this is a graphical problem. Anyway, just to show that how it stands with energy efficiency. Unfortunately, the goal or the double of the speed of energy efficiency improvement may not be attained, and this we should use as an occasion, a further occasion to discuss about why this is the case. Next slide. So I now come to discuss the methodology interpretation of these two scenarios. Next slide. So the scenario computation methodology of the sustainable energy scenario is a very simple one, and everybody can do that. So the idea is you take the figures, the best available figures you have for any quantity you want to monitor. You spot the turning points, and then you use the observation that the evolution after the turning point shows a growth rates which depend linearly on the time. That's the y dot equals AT plus B. This is a differential equation, but for estimation, it is very easy to estimate the coefficients A and B. You can do that in Excel. You can calculate the future growth rates. You then can apply the future growth rates to the last data point you have, simply by extrapolating, by adding the growth rate to the last data point, and then you are done. Simply now, you should interpret it correctly. So this method produces scenarios, not forecasts, because human behavior is basically not predictable. And the biggest uncertainty today is if some world leaders openly refuse the sustainability agenda. So this is why this cannot be taken as a prediction. And just as a reminder, in which the data we found turning points in global population, as I mentioned, in global CO2 emissions, I also mentioned. Then further, we found in total final energy consumption, 1980, after the two oil shocks, and in renewable energy employment in 2016, after people have started realizing that you can make money in the renewable energy industry. Next slide. For the interpretation of this, so the interpretation, of course, has to be has to take care of the macro scale business, has to be seen as a macro scale business as usual scenario, in which three factors are really evolving in the future as they were during the data collection period. First of all, engineers develop new innovative technologies at the same speed as before. Secondly, the agents adapt their mindsets and management methods and behaviors at the same speed as before. And thirdly, the authorities improve regulations and public policies at the same speed as before. So we found really that this business as usual scenario by chance is the one which leads to carbon neutrality by mid-century. was a very big surprise of our research. So to produce, we also wanted to produce an unsustainable scenario. For that, we used a multivariate model of the classical type, like shown in the equation, to predict emissions from, in this case, from 3 explanatory variables, the total primary energy supply, GDP, and renewable electricity. And the problem, methodologically speaking, is that the coefficients A, B, and C are kept constant until the end of the time horizon, that is 2100. And this, in fact, creates, is a way to reflect internal constraints or bulk resistance to change. So it is something which can or should be taken note of, depending on the case and on what we want to say. So the difficulty.
Stefan, just
Yes.
on that, I think you have another minute or so left.
Yes, I will soon be finished. Yes. Okay, so with multivariate models, one of the difficulties you have is to know the future level of the variables which explain. Okay, next slide. Is actually, I'm just finished, because for benchmarking the cities, next slide. So how to use this for benchmarking the cities? Well, you can see in the great column, in the green column, we have calculated for each variable really the jump. And you can see, for instance, global population 9% increase, GDP 29% increase, and so on and so on. So a city can use this to know the global background and can set its targets so as not to fall behind. For instance, if we have total primary energy supply, well, there is a 10% increase. If a city wants not to fall behind, it should it can take this into consideration for planning differently. And what I want to draw, the last point I want to make here is that the per capita total primary energy supply is practically stable for already at 1.5% increase, and we are in a stable portion of this already. So globally, the energy production supply does not need to increase, but it needs to change in nature. So thank you very much, and I think that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. And also, for anyone interested to know more, Stefan's details are here, and that will be shared later as well. And this sets us up for the next conversation. But before that, I do think we have a very quick check-in with a very quick survey question. So Nazir, if we could please go to the next slide. So our question is, what do you need on your end, looking at energy valuations? What do you need most to get started or to do more in this field? Again, it's a 20-second survey. Okay, I'm seeing the answers come in, and there are about 31 people participating in this. So the options are resources, targeted training, mentors and coaches, effective community of practice, and stakeholder awareness. And the most popular so far is resources, access to things like case studies, toolkits, etc., followed closely by targeted training and an effective community of practice. Good. So when we go into the panel discussions, some of these things may just come up again. So thank you very much. Let's move on to the next section. And here, I would like to invite my colleague, Nina Campbell, who's joining us today from Luxembourg. So a little bit about Nina. Nina has a very extensive experience in energy efficiency and climate change policy. She has worked with IEA and also with the New Zealand government. Also, while at IEA, Nina led their groundbreaking work on capturing the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. And we are very lucky indeed to have her speak to us about this topic today. Hi, Nina. I'm handing the stage to you now.
Morning, everybody. Morning in Luxembourg, anyway. Hello, nice to be with you. So I'm going to be talking to you about the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. So picking up on the conversation that you've already been having around the importance of energy efficiency and how to measure it. So multiple benefits is an issue that is much talked about in evaluation circles. It comes up in most conference agendas because it's quite an exciting area, but also very difficult to measure. So what we mean by multiple benefits to start with is essentially that investment in energy efficiency can provide a whole range of different benefits to different stakeholders. So it encourages us to think about what it is we're going to be measuring and what's most important to the stakeholders we're working with. So although the traditional drivers for improving energy efficiency, the things that we typically measure are energy savings, dollar savings, emissions reductions, those sorts of key impacts, there's actually a much broader range of impacts that we can be thinking about. And sometimes those turn out to be more interesting and important to the people we're working with than the traditional ones. Sometimes we can be surprised by that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we can do a better job of measuring that broader range of multiple benefits. So I'll go to the next slide, please. So just to draw the connection with what you've already been discussing and recap, the energy efficiency is essentially using more energy more efficiently. So we've heard a lot about that already. It's often talked about as the hidden fuel. I'm not sure if people have heard that expression before. It comes out of the idea that, in fact, with energy efficiency, we're talking about the energy that we didn't use. So it's invisible, and sometimes that can be hard to get excited about, except for technical people like ourselves, and often overlooked as a policy measure. However, over the years, it's been renamed to First Fuel. It was the International Energy Agency that proposed this new perspective, which is really around acknowledging that actually energy efficiency is the quickest and most cost-effective way to reduce carbon emissions. So really should be the first thing we do, not the last, not an afterthought. And you can see that from this slide here, the IEA's projections of what will be contributing to the emission savings that we need by 2050. And in the bar right over on the left, you can see that the green energy efficiency measures contribute over a third of the savings that we need to reach net zero by 2050. So hugely important. Can't emphasize that enough. However, it does remain, although we talk about it as a first fuel, we do know that the opportunities don't get picked up enough. It faces a range of barriers that have been talked about a bit as well. And we know that under the current policies, actually a lot of those energy efficiency opportunities may go unrealized. So what we're doing with talking about multiple benefits is offering a way to add value to energy efficiency, to do a better job of explaining the value of its benefits in real terms, and hopefully boost uptake of that policy measure to get us to net zero at 2050. So I'll move on to the next slide, please. So this is what we call the multiple benefits flower, and essentially it attempts to explain that there are actually not just 2 or 3 benefits of energy efficiency. You can see energy savings, GHG emissions, energy security up there, but actually a whole range of different benefits across the whole economy and society. So if we start to think about what's happening across all sectors of society, we can really start to dig deeper into what effects are taking place across the economy when we improve energy efficiency. And these can range from benefits for the energy system, those are more in the green set of colors, a range of economic benefits from the macro level to public budgets, through industrial productivity. We can also look at environmental benefits, air pollution, local environment, and also the indoor environment. So how are we improving the lived environment inside the home? And then we get into health and well-being, which is a huge topic that interests a lot of governments. So in fact, these benefits can really improve the understanding that we're going to have with our evaluation about what's happening, but also improve the value of those policies in terms of the cost benefit, if we can capture some of these benefits. And it helps us to put a face on energy efficiency. So it's no longer something fully technical and perhaps difficult to capture and measure. It's actually something really tangible, interesting, and valuable, not just to technical energy people, but also to policymakers, to politicians, and to voters, and to people in their homes, effectively. So the thing is, we know that a lot of these are identified by evaluators. Often we see a line at the end of a evaluation or a section, the other co-benefits that we couldn't measure. We know there were a lot. We saw a lot of things happening, but it wasn't within our project plan to measure these, or we couldn't find suitable metrics to measure these things, but we know they're there. What we want to encourage new evaluators to do more of is have a go at measuring these things. But first, I'll just give you a couple of little examples of what this can look like. So I'll go to the next slide. So here we're looking at the macroeconomic benefits, which can happen, can be triggered at all levels of the economy and show up at the macro level. So at the top end, the sum total of energy efficiency impacts will boost economic growth. And that's from two main effects taking place. So the first is increased investment in energy efficiency, goods and services, pushing money into the economy. And then the second is when energy efficiency improvements actually realized, the savings that get shifted from spending on energy to other sectors of the economy, which can be more productive and therefore generate more economic activity, more economic output. So we can safely assume that positive macroeconomic impacts will almost always accrue when energy efficiency improves, when the efficiency of the way that we use our resources improves. It makes sense. And in fact, the work that we did at the IEA on this, that Anindita mentioned, indicated that actually we can look at boosting GDP growth by between 0.25 and 1.1%. And those numbers sound small, but in GDP terms, that's huge. So these are really important issues to be able to raise if you're going to have an audience of Treasury departments looking at whether to continue to invest in a particular policy or program. And let's have a look at another one. So that's at the highest level. If we move on to the next slide, here's an example of how we can see the benefits accruing at the personal level, at the individual level inside households. So energy efficiency can improve the indoor environment and drive health outcomes, as I said. So we can see that if we're doing insulation, if we're improving cleaner heat with heating, making it cleaner and more efficient, perhaps installing more efficient energy using appliances, then the indoor environment's going to become warmer, drier, or perhaps cooler, depending on the climate, and cleaner in terms of the air that people are breathing. And a lot of work has been done in this space, in particular, probably one of the most well-researched of the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, to provide evidence there are actually huge impacts in health that are often unmeasured, especially if we're doing work on the residential sector. So in New Zealand, we've done several studies looking at our home retrofit programs. We've found that the health benefits outweighed the energy benefits, or outweighed the investment 7 to 1. And of the benefits, the health benefits were significantly more valuable than the energy benefits, which the programs were originally designed to deliver. Certainly as a result of those evaluations, government's now funding much greater rollout of those renovation programs. And actually the driver tends to be health outcomes now, more so than energy outcomes. So it's really interesting how it can change the conversation if we start putting numbers behind some of these things. Next slide, please. So I wanted to say a word about the rebound effect here, because when we take this perspective, it can change how we're thinking about the rebound effect. So it's always important to consider the rebound effect. We want to look at how our policies are changing the whole environment, And that can include changing behavior so that more energy is used. We can understand that, and we normally relate to the rebound effect as a negative thing. So it's undermining the energy savings that we were expecting to get, because now people are washing their clothes more often because it's cheaper. That sort of effect can tend to look like it undermines what we set out to achieve. But if we take this multiple benefits approach, we can have a look at what is the benefit that people are taking when they trigger a rebound effect. And in fact, it's often positive. So we can see, so we can see, for example, that some benefits, okay, so we can see that some benefits are going to be entirely dependent on energy savings, while others could drive up energy consumption. So if we're looking at health and well-being, in fact, is not entirely dependent on energy savings. So if we decide to use more heating or more cooling because suddenly it's cheaper, that's actually providing a really important health and well-being benefit to the household, and can be counted if we spend the time to do it in monetary terms and added as a benefit rather than counted as an energy saving that we missed out on. So yes, turning up the air conditioning can drive up energy consumption, but actually deliver really positive outcomes in real terms for the people that the policies and programs are trying to help. So I think we're almost at the end there. I wanted to just finish off on the next slide by underlining what it is to take a multiple benefits approach. So for new evaluators, young evaluators, but also actually all evaluators, we're on a journey with multiple benefits, and even experienced evaluators are still toying with the best ways of capturing these types of benefits. But there are several sort of key recommendations that we make around how to do this. So the first is that we need to apply the multiple benefits approach. In fact, not only in our evaluation, but actually right up front when we're thinking about designing policies and programs. So that's something for people who are involved in the design of policies and programs to think about, not just how much energy can we save, but what are all the things that this community, this economy might value, and to what extent could this program potentially have an impact on those things. And there's a job of picking and choosing out of that sort of menu of different benefits, which are the ones that matter in the place that you're doing the work. And if you're the evaluator, you also might have a role, if you're lucky, in the early ex-ante process around policy and evaluation design for a policy right up front. That's ideal. And certainly if you're involved at that stage, then you can introduce those sorts of questions when you're designing your evaluation. What should we measure? Maybe we should go beyond energy savings and carbon emissions. Let's have a look at some of this exciting other stuff. So the other point is that we have to take an innovative approach, because, as I said, some of these benefits are outside our expertise area in the energy field, or they're not regularly measured. We have to usually engage some other stakeholders or experts from outside your field if we're talking about measuring health or mental well-being, for example. And we might also have to try some new tools. Have a go at using different ways to measure people's reactions and values, perhaps using subjective measures. Don't be afraid of subjective measures. It's always better to attach some kind of value to something that we know is important than to leave it with a value of 0 in an afterthought in an evaluation report that we know something else happened. We don't know how big it was. So have a go. That's my recommendation. And if you would like to learn more about the multiple benefits approach, my last slide has a little snapshot of what the book looks like, and you can find it on the International Energy Agency's website. Also happy to be contacted if anyone would like to discuss.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nina. And I really like the message of just have a go at it. And some value to things that are important are much better than leaving it at 0 value. So thank you so much for that. Up next is Archana Walia. And just a little bit about Archana. Archana has more than 30 years of experience in international agencies like USAID and in nonprofits like Clean Air Asia, where she's the India director at the moment. Her work has covered big projects and leadership roles in topics such as climate and clean energy, energy efficiency, air pollution, and much more. Today, Archana will continue this discussion and share with us a co-benefits approach. So I'm handing over the stage to you, Archana.
Thank you, Anindita. Thank you for the very kind introduction, and it is my pleasure and honor to be here on this panel today. And I would like to thank the organizers first for providing me and my EEAP colleagues with an opportunity to discuss this all-important topic here. So on evaluation, we know a lot of my, eminent colleagues from EAP have already spoken about it, and that, the context has been very well laid out. And I am very pleased to introduce and discuss an important topic of, a co-benefits approach today here with you. And just as well that my presentation is coming after Nina, because I think a lot of messages that came out from her presentation, I'm going to reinforce them. And I'm kind of expanding it beyond just energy sector and, look at some of the value addition of that approach. Next slide, please. So I will not dwell much upon my slide on evaluation, except to say that it is an essential part. When done well, it can help solve the problem, inform decision-making, and build knowledge. It is a systematic process and an objective assessment of a project, program, or a policy or initiative to determine its effectiveness, efficiency, relevance, and sustainability. I think the important point to note here is that mostly evaluations are post-project reviews, but done to maximize the value of return on investment made, both for programs and projects under review and future ones. Next slide, please. I skipped this slide because the purpose of evaluation has been very well covered by Ed in his presentation. So I think we can just skip and move on to the next slide. As I said, that the PPR reports are basically end of the project reports and an assessment of the value for money provided by the investment. It is to assess the cumulative net benefit yield and also to make recommendations for future investments derived both from positive and negative lessons, if any. Next slide, please. So, coming to the topic of my presentation here, we know that co-benefits approach for most policymakers and, alleviating poverty or securing energy supplies or reducing environmental pollution sometimes take, and for good reasons, take priority over mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. We know that the awareness for global warming and the concern for global warming is growing, so we need an approach that meets both the development needs while addressing the longer-term climate concerns as well. So this is what the co-benefits approach is all about. It can not only lead to quicker and more cost-effective greenhouse gas mitigation, but also bring carbon financing for the developing needs. So what do we really understand by co-benefits? At the core, it is aimed at capturing both the development and climate benefits in a single policy or measure, making it a win-win strategy. Much as the term, I think, came about sometimes in the 1980s, if I'm not wrong, but way back as 2001, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in its third assessment report published in 2001, it gave a distinction to co-benefits or the intended positive side effects of a policy from ancillary benefits or unintended positive side effects. So the various synonyms that have been used for co-benefits, and we also heard multiple benefits, which also is kind of a synonym to what I'm discussing here, is side benefits, secondary benefits, collateral benefits, and associated benefits. So the important message that here is that the co-benefits approach, it focuses on duplicating those areas of action through which development needs of societies are met. And we know how important these are specifically in the Asian context, and climate change concerns, which are also the national responsibilities and targets to the NDC for the global climate concerns. So it does help the policymakers to prioritize action by incorporating multiple benefits in economic analysis of policy interventions. It can help reduce the risk of unintended negative consequences by more systematically considering other effects that may result. Next slide, please. So if we really look at, I think it's important to discuss how this terminology is being used, and it has been used as development co-benefits, which is basically refers to local benefits of climate change policies. These benefits can range from improved air quality or, moving to cleaner technologies, better job provisions. Then there's the terminology called climate co-benefits, which is refers to global climate change benefits of developmental plans or sectoral policies and measures. This view on co-benefits emerged in response to the belief that developing countries would focus on development before climate. And these basically are the compulsions of the developing world. Then there's also climate and air co-impacts, which refers to multi-directional impacts of typically air pollution interventions on local, regional, and global climate change systems. This view is often employed by the air pollution community when discussing short-lived climate warmers such as black carbon or short-term climate coolers. If you notice, I myself am using the word the air pollution community or the energy community or the climate community. And I think this is where we need to look at, because air pollution and energy are basically two sides of the same coin. So it is important to look at it in a more integrated manner. And that is where I think the relevance and the importance of the co-benefits approach lies. Next slide, please. So just looking at some of the co-benefits of climate actions that I just mentioned, some of the co-benefits include cleaner air, creation of green jobs, improved public health from active travel. I mean, you can travel freely because, the air quality across is good, across geographies is good, and can support biodiversity. So depending on your area of intervention, it can have those kind of multiple benefits. Climate policy co-benefits in some well-researched areas like air quality and health, they are large, often exceeding the mitigation cost of these measures. But we also know that despite their significance, the co-benefits are seldom considered in decision-making. So this leads to kind of biased policies and sometimes failures of goals. So in areas such as energy security, co-benefits are sparsely researched, but there's a lot of evidence which is emerging, and Lina pointed to many of them in the energy sector, is that there's high value that is attached or that must be also factored in. So we need more research, including on how to describe the total value of different co-benefits. We need improved processes, we need documentation, we need criteria in decision making in order that these decision makers can consider co-benefits approach in their policy making process. Next slide, please. So since we are about energy evaluation today, if we look at some of the co-benefits of the energy transition, and these are kind of summarized here, but you did hear the details from my previous speaker, that at the time of mitigating carbon emissions, a clean energy transition also offers other socioeconomic and environmental co-benefits. And there are environmental co-benefits, there are socioeconomic co-benefits, and there are environmental co-benefits. So I'll not dwell upon them because it has been again discussed at length. I think I should have mentioned the source of this diagram, which is taken as an example from Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center, Japan's paper. So that's the source here. Sorry for not including it in my presentation. So if you just look at, this is what I'm trying to kind of get the message across is that we have the national development needs. So which is basically meeting the increasing energy demand because of urbanization or because of the growing economy. Then we have specific development needs, which could be expanding the thermal power plant. On the other hand, we have the sustainable development goals to meet, and then we have the efforts to address the climate change. So this, which is being done by increasing the energy efficiency, reducing the greenhouse gas mitigation. So we really need to find these areas of overlap, area of action, where we bring in an integration of introducing new technologies, switching fuels to new or existing facilities. So I think this is where the co-benefit approach basically comes around, which kind of meets the dual objectives of development and climate change. Next slide, please. So this is basically just to say that within the energy sector, when we talk about clean energy transition or we talk about energy security, there are different areas. So whether we're working on conservation or fuel switching or efficiency or abatement and also behavior change, something that again, got mentioned in the previous speaker's presentation. This is whichever area of operation we are in, we need to think beyond that little box, and we need to think about like the broader environmental concerns as well. Next slide. I think so. What is important is what do we need to do for mainstreaming the co-benefits in Asia? So we have now, I think, enough evidence to show that the value addition. I think the first point is that we do not have a consensus on the best entry point for integrating co-benefits into decision making. Some focus on climate policies, others look at sectoral plans, while others think of our air pollution. So this is where we need to help clarify the concept. Secondly, we do not have any agreement on the tools and methods to evaluate co-benefits. So this is there's a diversity of measurement tools, even for international mechanisms, which are well understood, well researched, like the Clean Development Mechanism. It also kind of has a twin goal of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. But all these things basically do not really have the real kind of tools and techniques to measure the co-benefits. So that is like an important area of work going forward. Secondly, what we need is that estimating these future emissions and quantifying the cost and benefits for better understanding of this approach, I think is needed. Capacity building aimed at improving the quantification methods, technical cooperation through training using quantification guidelines to help generate and disseminate knowledge and skills in developing countries is very, very essential, because this is here where our development needs kind of, override sometimes and compromise on the climate concerns. And then removing financial barriers. Once the co-benefits are recognized and quantified, they will need to be financially rewarded as well. Currently, we know that most policies, they discount the social and the economic benefits. So building these institutional arrangements and incentive structures that reward co-benefits could reduce the initial cost barriers and draw investors into the co-benefits projects. So this could be done through international climate change regimes, and we have the Green Climate Fund and the big global kind of financial institutions, which can definitely kind of research and kind of give us some solutions on this. So with that, I'll stop, because the intent was only to get the message across. So thank you once again for this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Archana. We do have a couple of questions that we'll get to, if possible, in the panel. Otherwise, we will email our participants back with our answers. Thank you for that. I think in the interest of time, we really should move now to our next presenter. We will not do the survey question. So I'd like to invite now Auguste Pantoro, who will speak to us about advocating for capacity building for evaluation. Now, a little bit about Auguste. He has more than 15 years of experience in development programs, the evaluation, performance management, and capability building. He is a co-founder of Indonesia Development Evaluation Community and serves as an executive board member of the Indonesian Energy Evaluation Institute. And he will speak to us about what's going on in his world with regards to energy evaluations. Thank you, Auguste. Thank you so much. I'm handing the stage to you now.
Thank you, Anindita, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Auguste, representing Indonesian Energy Evaluation Institute, established in 2021 as a young emerging institution for advocating and promoting evaluation in energy sector in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So Indonesia has been good in making policy and plans. The necessary policy and plan for energy sector development are all developed and in place. Even now, just recently in 2023, we just launched a detailed, comprehensive investment policy and plan for just energy transition towards net zero emission by 2060. Next slide. We also have a specific target in on energy efficiency, which include reduced energy intensity, increased share of renewable energy, energy elasticity, and energy saving across various sectors. The targets are considered very ambitious by many, and this make everyone focus on target measurement and tracking. And although tracking and monitoring target is very important to tell how well we are progressing, but there's a little effort for evaluations that actually will help us understand what works and doesn't work. So this is something that we need to work on. Next slide, please. And in talking about the national evaluation policy, Indonesia has no single consolidated policy for evaluation at national level. However, monitoring and evaluation has been mainstream to some extent into many government agencies into different regime, planning, finance, sectoral and governance and delivery, based on their core area and responsibility. But all is not equal. In energy sector, the Ministry for Energy and Mineral Resources in pink box there, their policy and regulation contains only normative aspiration for evaluation, but with no clear and strong directions, instruction or requirement for systematic evaluations. Next slide, please. With lack of clarity and also with no strong direction for evaluation in the institution, this leads to issue and challenge in evaluation practice and use. So, first one is actually many people think they conduct an evaluation, but actually they're not employing clear methodology in the systematic data collections, and which make many of evaluation that they conducted become not credible. And also evaluation is often conducted ad hoc, random, or sudden in last minute. So the evaluation become just a fun and budget spending exercise, it become inefficient or just waste of resources. And there's no supportive culture in many government institutions, and evaluation is also often perceived as another work burden without a budget support, lack of human resources in place, and no appropriate infrastructure and tools to support the evaluation conduct there. And all will lead to non-use, misuse, and or abuse of evaluation, I guess. Next slide. So what is actually required for improvements and what we have been working on to improve this? Next slide, please. It is important to engage the stakeholder in evaluations. Noted that the presentation from Ed from previous. So we suggest to do advocacy, not to do advocacy work for promoting evaluation not within your own bubble. So it is crucial to be aware of various stakeholders that we need to engage. IEI, Indonesian Energy Evaluation Institute, is not only focusing on evaluation service providers in this case, but also work with the evaluation users and also try to gather support from special interest groups that are actually potential actors to support our endeavors in promoting energy evaluations. Next slide. So evaluation, we acknowledge that is an integral part of monitoring and evaluation system and learning as a whole within the government organizations. Thus, we want to advocate to government that having a policy target and an indicator for energy sector is not sufficient, but it's important to have all supporting system for monitoring, evaluation, and learning to generate data, analysis, and reporting for monitoring and evaluations, and facilitate the utilization of evaluation for improvement and learning. So to establish a functional monitoring evaluation system, we don't expect governments to create a new system, I guess, but they need to ensure that the existing subsystem in the government systems, government organizations have already incorporated the requirement and functions to support the operation of the monitoring evaluations, including the budgeting process, human resources, all this IT infrastructure, and also leadership and everything, communication, also coordinations. Next slide, please. Further, to enable and support operation of function for monitoring and evaluation within the government organization, it is necessary to have a evaluation capacity building program as well. Training, seminar, and workshop will not be sufficient, as we need to have a capacity program with a comprehensive approach in addressing supply and demand for evaluations, as you can see in this simple logic model of evaluation capacity building here. Next slide, please. Well, this is something that we kind of like try to do as well, to engage young emerging evaluators who will play a bigger role for evaluation, especially in energy sectors. Because youth has this trait or characteristic, they have a comfort to challenge the hierarchy and status quo. They are free thinking and creative, so they can be innovative in developing new evaluation approach and methods. They have passion for learning. They are open to feedback, adaptive to change. They have intuitive knowledge of technology and internet, so they can be efficient in using appropriate technology for evaluations. So this will make big difference to evaluation practice in their future. Because actually evaluation practice also need to adapt with new technologies, new emerging trends, also a changing context around the globe, I guess. Next slide, please. This is key takeaway. I just want to quickly highlight some takeaways from the presentations. We need to continue to focus our work on advocating and promoting evaluations to all key stakeholders with some following considerations. To advocate governments for improved policy for supporting energy evaluations, facilitate them in developing agenda for energy evaluation, something that sometimes is not in place yet, assist them in establishing system, process, and procedures, as well as the tools for energy evaluations, conduct, continue engaging stakeholders to create demands for evaluation, while also implement evaluation capacity building to increase supply of good professional evaluators. And last but not least is to start engaging young emerging evaluators and do in many ways, providing enabling environment for them to kind of like grow. I think that's all. Thank you and for having me, and look forward to the discussions today. Back to you, Anu.
Thank you, Agus. And actually, there is still 1 or 2 minutes left in your time. So I would like to point to something you said, which is that in Indonesia, you're working with stakeholders to increase the demand for evaluations. And so what are you doing around that? And what needs to happen more?
Well, it's kind of like a different way to create demand. Sometimes you want to approach the leader first, like the organization leaders. Sometimes you need to work on the top-down approach, like having this top leader to get in the same pace and understanding the important evaluations. How will this evaluation benefit to their work or their contribution to the country target? While you also work with the other stakeholders like association or the academia, so like putting some more pressures to the governments, so they can also create demand and pushing the government to also create demand for evaluation. So there's a kind of like a different theory of change, how to create demands. I guess that's one example, like you can bring a coalition of civil society to push more demands, push more pressure to governments, while you can also work with the top leaders using the top-down approach. And this top leader will have like a kind of like a imperative directions to the subordinate and below, something like that.
Okay. Agus, thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. And so far, we've had 5 different presentations. We're about to go to the last one. What we saw was Ed began with the foundations of what kind of efficiency evaluations exist, followed by Stefan bringing in benchmarking for climate, carbon emissions, and other indicators. Then Nina spoke about multiple benefits of energy efficiency, and then Archana spoke about a co-benefits approach. Then Agus talked about a very on the ground, like what is going on, what's real for people approach. And the final presentation is going to be Ripu Bhanjan Singh. So we can move, and I just want to do a quick introduction of Ripu. Ripu is also a member on the steering committee of EEAP, is a strategic consultant with the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Ripu has very deep experience in clean energy sector, and he's worked with donors like USAID, DFID, and others. Ripu specializes in the design and development of M&E systems. And he is going to close this discussion, the 6 discussions, by talking about, of course, energy valuations are great and key to doing a lot of good things. However, things are not where they ought to be. And with that, I'm going to hand the stage to Ripu.
Thank you, Anandita. I hope you can hear me well, can see me. I wanted to really start on a personal note on why do I really feel excited about joining these sessions. And like every one of you, I think I'm always eager to learn from the vast knowledge and experience that comes to these sessions, right? And this session so far has been incredible in that regard. And I'm truly honored in that respect. And after those insightful presentations to be part of it, to be part of this session. And I want to really thank the organizers for putting this together. And Anandita, you really captured well on what has already been said with Ed, Stephen, Nina, Archana. And one of the particular things that stuck to my mind was on Stephen's, one of the slides that Stephen mentioned, that relating your born years to carbon intensity, right? The ppm levels than the years. So that really stuck, and that tells the story about how evaluation can really pave the way if they are done and communicated in a very local language, so to say, like the born year, right? If I'm 84, what was the carbon intensity at level? And that's exactly where I do want to start the conversation about and do a bit of contextualization. And let's go to the first slide. And I do want to start by mentioning that, I mean, after listening to all these presentations, it is very clear that the world is at the cusp of transformation with the current transitions going on in the energy sector, going from fossil fuels to renewables. And it becomes more and more important and prominent for Global South, where it's just the beginning right now. And we know how the fossil fuel industry has been, in many sense, the problems to the communities, to the way the development has happened in the past. And that's where I do want to contextualize that why do we really feel that energy sector is a key enabler to the global economy in that sense, because on energy, it's actually powering the factories, lighting homes. A reliable supply is essential for every sector we can think of, and it has a strong linkage between the consumption and the economic growth. Post-pandemic recovery really hinges on a robust energy sector. And to that effect, to ensure the affordable energy, it is crucial for powering healthcare, remote work, basic needs, and fostering a more equitable post-COVID world, right? In short, I think a well-designed energy strategy is just not just fuel for recovery, but it's a springboard for a sustainable world that we are aiming for today. Understandably, there have been a lot of financial and fiscal stimuluses that have been introduced. I mean, more recent has been by the UNEP, the United Nations Energy Environment Program, who are putting a lot of stimulus packages for this massive opportunity that exists in this transformation. Which is in turn looking at a lot of green recovery and giving impetus to the green jobs that are being introduced in the sector, in the energy sector. And moreover, the need to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, SDG number 7, which is affordable and clean energy for all, was never been felt as important as it is now. That's why I just wanted to say that this is the real context of why we feel that energy valuation will be prominent, considering the role energy sector would play in the future. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, and I do want to start with saying that what is the challenge and what is the opportunity? It's basically looking at, I mean, and how we look at, I mean, whether it's at EEAP or my previous or current roles, we do see that ongoing transition to a clean energy economy is a once in a century opportunity. It is an opportunity to reshape societies and not just mitigate climate challenge or climate change challenge. It is an opportunity to incorporate social injustices, transform the world, particularly the global south, with India at its fulcrum, because it is just the beginning here, as we talked about. It is really at the crossroads, the sector, the transition. As the world's largest growing developing economy in India, it can give really a blueprint for such a transition to the rest of the world. And we stand at a crucial journey to make that blueprint, and it needs to be generates the transition that really generates the equal opportunities for all, and is also presents the opportunity for us to inform the energy policies of the future through the energy evaluation approaches. And we've seen that there is a now need, while we're looking at transition, we also need to look at a transition from the approaches that we follow in the evaluation. It has largely been very program specific or a short-term project specific. Can we really move the needle from a program or a project specific to a systems approach, to a policy approach? But again, there are challenges, and that brings me to the next slide, where we see that actually, there are reasons why we are not seeing evaluation at the center stage, and we really need to evaluate ourselves as a community also, right? That why do we really see that evaluation is not a priority, even though evaluation guarantees better outcomes and enables informed decision making, as we have seen in the previous presentations. And the next question is, what is it that we as an evaluation community do to make an evaluation a higher priority? And that's where I wanted to discuss my last couple of slides on. There are reasons for why do we not see evaluations aren't prioritized. Particularly, I'll start with the first one, which I have personally seen in my journey as an energy evaluator with USAID or a DFID funded programs within the implementation teams and partners, that it's an unsaid perception, and it's also a historical baggage of perception, often negative, that comes with evaluations. And being in that field, I've seen that historically, evaluations have often been seen as an exercise to judge the performance of the program. And that's a very big emphasis on the word judge. We are not seen as partners. At least I wasn't seen as a partner or a co-organizer or co-partner in the evaluation in the program, right? I was more seen as someone who is coming externally and trying to question the very design of the implementation. Maybe we could do a different, maybe we could design the evaluation in a different form at that time. And I was actually seen as an outsider, as a third party. And due to this perception, evaluation most of the times remains as an external phenomenon, with resistance from either the organization who is hosting the evaluation or the internal implementation teams who are being evaluated. And that's a major hindrance at the first step, or how evaluations can be effective, right? The second step, which I saw in my personal journey, or which we see as EEAP, is also the real value of evaluations or the evaluators that bring to the table is really unknown. Often the decision makers are unaware of the real value or the outcomes of the evaluation itself. And that also brings me to the point that Nina mentioned, that how do we really make evaluations effective? How do we communicate, and how do we contextualize the evaluation? And I think as people, and I do see there are quite young people on this call, it's very important to really understand the challenges in that respect. And coming back to that, it's the real values also tends to, the evaluation tends to be associated with a mandatory requirement to be fulfilled just to remain compliant in some sense, and not as a real value addition to the program. The actual conduct of an evaluation is also believed to be a very resource intensive process in terms of time, energy, and cost. And that also brings a lot of question to its real value. The other thing that we've really seen is evaluations are largely ad hoc in nature. Frequently, evaluations are run on a very ad hoc basis or as required for some key policies or programs or projects. Evaluations are being seen as a responsible thing to do. However, it still lacks a pragmatic and systematic approach to it. And that's why there is a need of a shift for a more comprehensive approach sooner than later. We have talked about capacity building. I mean, in the survey that Anandita did, we did see that, okay, there is a need for more case studies, more experiences, more resources and tools for evaluation. And that really ties to this lack of evaluation, capacity building. I mean, there are need to have resources which are simple yet effective to understand. And that's why a lack of it also becomes a challenge for an already disengaged staff to be part of the evaluation process. That's also linked to the short-term focus of the evaluations, where organizations or programs might prioritize immediate needs over long-term investments and neglecting the real potential for future energy cost savings that might come out of such an evaluation. Lack of awareness is also one of the factors that we see. Limited knowledge about the availability, benefits, and different types of energy evaluations that can hinder their adoption. There are obviously funding constraints. As Ed mentioned, it's not a free of charge service. Evaluations do need payments. Evaluators need to be paid. There are costs associated with traveling, going out to the people, having a conversation, and there are funding constraints to that. The upfront cost of an evaluation may be seen as a barrier, and it really is for a short-term site of projects, and especially for smaller organizations or for those who are facing financial limitations. There's obviously lack of technical expertise. Conducting a thorough evaluation requires a specialized knowledge, right? It needs a specialized skill, and creating a perceived need for an external expertise that can add to the cost as well. Split incentives, last but not the least, what I've understood is there is a need or a lack of it, of really communicating the effects of evaluation in a feedback loop. I mean, who is conducting the evaluation, how the results are being communicated. And plus the split incentives are also linked to, sometimes there is a less motivation to even invest in let's say a building and efficient improvements identified by an evaluation, because bills are not being paid at the first place, like the energy bills are not being paid at the first place. So why do we really need to invest in doing the efficiency of the buildings if you're not anyways paying? So those are the kind of challenges that we face, that we feel are important, and why evaluations aren't being prioritized. Let's move to the next slide and see, okay, these were the reasons, but what can really evaluators or evaluation community of practices can really do to make it a priority at some sense? Well, the above factors will remain a hindrance to not just energy evaluation, but any kind of evaluation to be effective. And the energy sector is no exception. At EEAP, Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, we are a progressive community of energy evaluators, and we firmly believe that energy evaluators need to push the evaluation agenda at the center of the energy policy framework. And there are ways and means to do it. One of the ways that we think is important is to adopt a strategic communications approach to really disseminate energy evaluation results. We as evaluators really need to communicate evaluation results more effectively. And the individuals who are really looking forward to join this wagon of evaluators, I think it's really important to understand the importance of this aspect, that a simple and a straightforward key recommendations within a page or two, supported by a crisp analysis and evidence, goes a long way to create the value that evaluation adds. And sometimes it's not just it's not just what we are trying to speak, but the way we speak makes a large difference on how it's getting perceived and how it's getting enacted upon. And I think as evaluators, as young evaluators, it's really important to communicate the results very simply in a very succinct manner to the key stakeholders. And accordingly, the results need to be presented and designed also attractively, so that they're easy to digest and understand. And I think this approach it goes a long way, both internally and externally, to build allies within the stakeholders. Changing perceptions, I think examples do matter a lot. There is a long pending need to flip the perception of evaluation being tangential and of little value to key stakeholders. I think a consistent dialogue is needed, for instance, to share examples of an effective energy evaluation influencing decision-making, which in turn yielded improved results. I think there is a need to even evaluate the evaluation and see where did it go from the evaluation, where did it land with that. And there are examples from many countries, and if we can share and exchange those results, that goes a long way as well. Through success stories, through targeted case studies, and the return on investment emphasis also. What was the cost of the evaluation, and how did it really yield the results in a tangible manner? Effective community of practice, obviously, it needs to be in place through knowledge sharing platforms like these, create online communities, have training programs and workshops like these, which we are having. And congratulations to the Youth of Energy Evaluation Committee to bring this up. And obviously, I think there's a need for an industry collaborations as well. We need to partner with the industry associations to develop best practices and standards for an energy evaluation. Last but not the least, I think it's important to engage at the decision-making level, because that's where the bucks are, and that's where it starts, and that's where it ends. And I think as evaluators, we need to engage at the decision-making levels. We need to identify champions, locate key decision makers in government, businesses, organizations who can advocate for energy evaluations. And I think Agus did mention that how they are looking at those aspects of engaging decision makers for evaluation, tailored communications, and obviously highlighting long-term benefits, emphasizing on the value proposition that energy evaluations bring to the table, and showcasing how they contribute to a sustainable and resilient future. Again, evidence-based advocacy, standardizing the data collection platforms, policy integration within the existing policies and regulations, such as building codes or the loan programs, data-driven impact approach, and last but not the least, it needs to be part of the larger energy policy framework at the country level through incentive programs for evaluation. How do you incentivize evaluation? How do you fund initiatives who are looking at evaluation? That's very, very important. And how do you really raise the public awareness about these things? I'll stop here, but I do think that this approach, the multi-pronged approach that we feel at EEAP, will generate the necessary impact for supporting a transition that is informed by evidence and evaluated at the core of it. Thank you, Anandita, and all the organizers.
Wonderful. Ripu, thank you very much. That was very interesting, and the panel will go back to some of these things, but please hold the slide there, Nazir. I want to make a couple of comments. First, a time check. We have a hard stop in exactly 11 minutes. So the panel, we will open it, and I think it would be about maximum of 7 to 8 minutes. The second thing is, I wanted to acknowledge that we had 2 or 3 excellent questions. Nina has responded to one. Alicia, you have a question as well on multiple benefits, but Nina had to drop off. Maybe we could circle back with you after this. I hope that would be all right with you. And also someone, I think Fazila shared a wonderful resource about sharing examples between governments. So there's a web link that she has shared as well. Thank you for doing that. I think that's something we should add to our resources as well. So thank you very much. With that, I will invite all of you to one discussion. And I think what I would like to propose is that we take up where Ripu left us, which is there's a lot to do. And I have to say, I've been in so many of these discussions where there is still a lot to do. And honestly, it's all important, but it sounds very high level. So what I would love to hear from you, each of you, and maybe we could just take turns, is like one practical thing an evaluator can do tomorrow in their work to start implementing some of the ideas that we've heard before, whether it's capability building, stakeholder engagement, going to resources, finding the mentors, the coaches, the community of practice, anything. Please, one practical idea that our young evaluators or professionals interested can do starting tomorrow in their work. And I'd like first for Ed to speak.
Well, thank you. This is great. Presentations from all the presenters. I really enjoy it and keep learning. And I'm going to actually suggest two things. Young evaluators should join Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific. Okay, number one. Number two, I think what I've learned in particular is you do need an organization where people come together with a similar intent and motivation. We started with EEAP for all of Asia, but in Indonesia, if you've heard, we have an Energy Evaluation Institute there. So I'm very pleased. And I think, at a minimum, there should be one for each of the countries in Asia Pacific. So I'll actually perhaps go to August and explain about the Indonesia Energy Evaluation Institute and sort of where it's headed now. They've been working on this for several years now. COVID, of course, got in the way for a lot of us, but I think we're sort of rebounding, and it'd be nice to thinking about particularly the last presentation with Ripu and all the challenges and what needs to be done. Do you think Indonesia is on the way to sort of addressing some of these issues? Just to put you on the spot.
Well, I don't know if Pak John is here. Pak John is actually the one who actually played a role in establishing this institute. We kind of like very maybe a baby crawling progress. Like we just start to engage everyone, like try to introduce our institutions and try to kind of doing some promotion, I guess. Currently, we are thinking about developing the curriculums in terms of like for capacity buildings effort in the future, and in possible case establishing an academy on that. But there's I understand that there's a lot of work, and IEI is still very limited. Like I said, a young emerging, still considered as a young emerging institutions. So I don't know whether it's actually according to our target or expectation, but seems still a work in progress. I don't know what to update more than that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, there's a need for commitment and perseverance and endurance. And I look forward to seeing more of what goes on in Indonesia. I'll hand this over to Anindita.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Ed, and thank you, Agus. So the same question, Stefan, one thing evaluators can do tomorrow to make a better evaluation world immediately.
Well, yes, I think evaluators usually as the one slide which did not come through correctly in my presentation showed, unfortunately, that the energy evaluation, energy efficiency target or set fixed by the world is not likely going to be attained by 2030. So what should we do? Well, the thing is mostly that in the emerging economies and developing economies, we should start early to get the idea of energy efficiency into their mindset. I think that is one of the moments where we should get it in. Energy efficiency is in the mindsets in the developed economies, but in the developing, I think they think, well, this is not for us. And in a way, it is true that somebody who has little energy efficiency, has little energy consumption, can gain less by energy efficiency, but still the mindset should be there. So it's because we have big disparities in developing economies among the richer and the poor. So you should start to go to contact those, reach those richer populations in the developing countries, and focus on these to go into energy efficiency. I think that is what we should do to try still to catch up with the missing target of SDG 713. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Ripu.
Thanks, Anandita. I think, and this is a practical takeaway, not just for young energy evaluators. I also question myself a lot when I work in this field. And I think the one key takeaway or a practical suggestion is to question and being inquisitive and being proactive in actively seeking out the why behind the energy evaluation data per se. And what do I mean by that? It's basically is a deeper understanding of why behind the data. I mean, a lot of data analysis is being done. We have seen that a lot in the past presentation. I think we need to go a little beyond numbers so that we do not the bigger picture, right? For instance, understanding the reasons behind the energy reuse, right? Whether it's just the use, or probably it's an old equipment, or maybe it's an inefficient processes involved. And this kind of an approach maybe allows for more targeted, improved strategies, right? And maybe that also recommends better recommendations by uncovering the root causes, right? And I think the young evaluators can move beyond the generic recommendations and suggest solutions that are directly addressing the specific issues in buildings or the facilities. And that goes, I think, a long way in building trust. I mean, if you are really demonstrating a grasp of the why, that shows a deeper understanding of the situation and really builds trust with the stakeholders. And to implement this, I think the way is to ask questions. I don't think we need to be, as young evaluators, do not be afraid of asking questions and keep looking for answers, seek out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ripu. So Archana and Nina have both dropped off. We cannot ask for their input, but we heard from all four of the speakers. There's one last thing before we close this session. I would like to bring on stage my colleague, Nazir Ul-Haq, who will share a few resources, because we talked about how can we learn more. So Nazir's put together an extensive list. And I want to say a little bit about Nazir. Nazir is our colleague. He's the coordinator here with EEAP. He is a fantastic professional to work with. He has at least 10 years of experience in evaluation and development and sustainability. And he's worked in Southeast Asia, Pakistan, Africa, and Brazil. And it's absolutely delightful to work with Nazir all the time. So Nazir, please share with us some resources that we can all learn from.
Thank you, Anindita. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details, but starting with our own website, Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, in line with our mission to strengthen capacities for energy evaluation, we have a wealth of resources on our website. There are more than 300 peer-reviewed papers that were presented in different conferences that we have put on our website under the resources section that you can check out. We also have webinar presentations regarding some of the different webinars and different events that we have been organizing. And we have also developed summary notes of the different webinars that we have conducted to give you a very concise way of the key learning from the different webinars. In addition, we have a directory of energy evaluation courses from different universities across the globe, covering hundreds of relevant courses related to energy evaluation that you can also check out. I have put the link on the chat. You can also take a look. We have a YouTube channel so far, 37 recordings of 37 webinars and conferences presentations that are uploaded there. You can also check it out. I would encourage you to follow our LinkedIn page. We have around more than 900 industry practitioners there, and we do engage, in exchanges and discussions there. Twitter, we also very active on Twitter. You can also follow us on Twitter to keep track of the different events we organize and as well as the different campaigns we participate. And we have quarterly newsletter. The next newsletter is going to be out by end of this month. So feel free to take a look there as well. In addition, I will very quickly share some other resources, not going through them, but I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them. edX, Coursera, and Udemy are some of the platforms that offer courses related to both energy and evaluation. Some of the organizations, in addition to EAP and what our colleagues share, you can also follow International Energy Agency, American Council of Energy Efficient Economy, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory that it has been a part of International Renewable Energy Agency, and a couple of UN agencies who are working in energy-related programs, including United Nations Environmental Program, UNDP, UNIDO, UNESCAP, who is very active in the Asia Pacific, and the World Energy Council as well. Some of the conferences, I will share the list with you, but just to share, there are a couple of conferences. Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific has been organizing conferences every 2 years. We haven't announced the date for the next one, but hopefully we will put it on our website and as well as LinkedIn page once it's finalized. But there are a couple of other relevant conferences in Asia Pacific, in Europe, and as well as the United States. So we'll be sharing the list with you. And for evaluation resources, these are some of the resources that I have compiled in terms of websites and platforms, capacity building events. But more importantly, as Ed shared, I would encourage you to join different professional networks, including Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, but also for young and emerging evaluators, there are youth networks in most of the countries in Asia Pacific at the global level and as well as at the regional level. So I would encourage you to join them, where you can learn, network with the professionals, and improve, strengthen your capacities. Thank you, Anindita. Back to you.
All right, so thank you for all of that. I want to close the session formally by thanking everybody. So thank you, Ed, thank you, Stevan, thank you, Ripu, thank you, Nazir, thank you, Agus, and thank you, Archana and Nina, who are not here. And every question, every chat comment, all interactions were absolutely fantastic. We definitely want you to be a part of our network, and we would love to continue the conversation. Thank you, and hopefully we'll meet each other again. Take care.
Thank you, Anindita. Thank you, Nazir. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.